Let's go out to the D&M Leasing Hotline to talk to Fort Worth Star Telegram's own Nick Harris. Nick, how are you doing on a Tuesday night? And
happy belated birthday.
What does Nick do when there's no Cowboys on?
Yeah, I appreciate you, fellas. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate the belated birthday. Yeah, no Cowboys, but there's no shortage of Cowboys news. So you might have to ask me that question in about 3 weeks once everything's determined.
Boy, you ain't lying about that. And I'll tell you what, one of the best dressed on
Cleanly
Sundays
shaven
as well. Well, I mean, I don't know about clean shaven. He's got the beard well kept, is what it is, right? By the way, how old are you? If you don't mind us asking.
Yeah, 25. Just turned 25 on Sunday.
25 gang over here. 25's a good year, Nick Harris.
My God, bunch of kids around here.
I'm betting Mike McCarthy wished that he had the same kind of excitement that we have. What do you think his mood around the Cowboys have been with all the news of getting denied interviews? What's kind of the sense and the energy you're feeling around the Cowboys front office right now?
Yeah, it's very quiet, and I think anybody would tell you that across the board right now. They're keeping their cards close to the vest. We know when you think you know one thing, you don't know another, and a lot of false information getting put out by people as well, just about certain things. So there's a lot going on, but I think truly at the end of the day, no one really knows what's going on behind closed doors. But you look at the Chicago Bears trying to request an interview with Mike McCarthy yesterday. Took the Cowboys a little over 24 hours to respond. They eventually said no. My assumption of that, and that's really all we can do as reporters, take the context that we know from the years gathered over covering McCarthy, covering this team, covering the Joneses, and try to apply it to the situation. My interpretation of that is that the two met and they had to sit down about, okay, hey, is this an interview you want to take? And if he said no, then they declined the request. And they have until January 14th to have exclusive negotiating rights with Mike McCarthy. His contract technically ends on Wednesday, tomorrow, but they have the rights to exclusively negotiate with him until next Tuesday. So it looks like they're going to take that period, at least as of now, to figure out a deal for both sides. But you look at the comments that Jerry Jones made after the game on Sunday, and you see him say that the determining and the negotiating is all in one swing. And that sentence tells me that Jerry Jones has an idea of what a return for Mike McCarthy looks like. And if Mike McCarthy can agree to what that idea looks like, then he'll be back. But if not, then they're probably going to go in a different direction.
Nick, you've done a lot more of those than I have, talking about the post-game Jerry conferences where we sit there and listen to him wax poetic for 20 minutes. And, I mean, look, my takeaway from that was I'm not sure what he's going to do at the coaching position. I mean, on one front, he's like, yeah, we love Mike, but then at the same time, too, if he didn't want to be here, we don't want him here. And then, maybe we're going to do an incentive-based contract, and you're just sitting there going to yourself like, what is all this? I mean, again, you've been around this team a lot longer than we have. Ultimately, what does your gut tell you about what they're going to do moving forward at the head coaching position? And does today's dismissal of the Chicago Bears kind of give you that warm fuzzy that Mike McCarthy will indeed be back?
Yeah, that's where my gut is leaning right now. And my gut going into Jerry's availability on Sunday is that McCarthy was probably going to be out. But then after hearing him talk for over 40 minutes after the game and breaking it down and listening to him a couple of times, I think Jerry Jones wants him back, but he wants him back on a certain set of terms that Jerry Jones wants. And I don't know. I don't have a good read on what those terms are or what those incentives look like. And, I think that's ultimately the bigger deciding factor when it comes to Mike McCarthy agreeing to come back or, agreeing to those terms to come back. But my lean right now is that McCarthy stays in Dallas, especially after today's news of him blocking the Chicago request.
You're listening to Nick Harris of the Fort Worth Star Telegram. Nick, me and Fred have kind of been discussing as far as the show going on that the Chicago Bears kind of forced the Joneses and the Cowboys front office hand by asking for this interview because we know the Cowboys usually are a little bit slow to move. Do you think the Bears doing this move this process up any faster, and do you think this will change the decision process, seeing that their coach is wanted by other teams, or do you think the decision was made bearing the Chicago Bears offer in the first place?
I don't think it necessarily expedited their process of figuring out, what's going to happen at the head coaching spot here in Dallas. But I think it certainly kind of gave us, the outside people, an opportunity to see what their thinking process is by them denying that request. Because I think it's telling. I think you can look at it and see that, okay, at least one of these sides or both determined that they do not want they don't want Mike to interview with the Chicago Bears. And so it means a conversation has happened, especially if it took over 24 hours to respond to that request. But I don't think it necessarily expedited the process. I think this is going to be a situation where they take it up until January 14th and figure out what this negotiation could look like for both sides. Mike McCarthy got a new agent this past summer, a guy that represents a lot of top paid head coaches here in the NFL.
It's Tom Brady's agent too, isn't it?
Exactly. And so Don Yee, he's going to try to get as much for McCarthy out of this process as well. This is going to be a complicated but fluid process, and I'm at the point where I'm expecting it to go until January 14th, if not a couple days before.
Well, let me ask you this just real quick on that note with Don Yee now being, and I didn't realize that he was his new agent, or that he had just hired Don Yee. Do you get the sense then that, if they go in and can't reach a deal, maybe by that 14th or whatever, that even though he's denied the Bears right now, that, again, if they can't agree to terms, that Mike still could be on the way out, or Mike just say, hey, look, shake hands, it's been well, or it's been great, carry on to the next.
Yeah, if we get to the 14th, 15th, 16th, and Mike is nowhere to be seen and buzz for other teams' head coaching spots, whether it be Jacksonville, a team that has a quarterback that could use an offensive-minded head coach, or a team like New Orleans where McCarthy has worked as an offensive coordinator for 5 seasons before. If we get to after January 14th and his name's not being tossed around in those discussions, I think it's going to kind of tell you what the thought process is for both sides for his return to Dallas, and it's just a matter of them figuring out what that negotiation actually looks like, because, an agent of Don Yee's caliber would tell you after January 14th, if you do not have a deal in place with the Cowboys, you need to go find a job. And Mike McCarthy said a couple of weeks ago that he's not in the position where he wants to be staying at home right now. And so he wants to go find another job if Dallas does not work out. So that's why I think this January 14th deadline is such a interesting caveat to this whole ordeal, because if we get to 48 hours after that and his name's starting to be tossed around, then I think maybe the Cowboys might be heading in a different direction. But if we get to 48 hours after and no deal has been done, but McCarthy's name's not being thrown around, then I think eventually you'll see McCarthy back in Dallas.
Another thing that's been just as interesting to me has been the assistant coaches, Mike Zimmer, Brian Schottenheimer, exterior coaches as well. What's kind of your read on some guys that you believe will be back? Obviously, we know a lot of these guys were on one-year deals, and kind of the sense of where the team is on those guys being brought back.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that have to be answered with those guys, but the question that can kind of pave the way to answering those is what happens with McCarthy, because most of those are McCarthy guys. And let's say that they do move on from McCarthy, right? That they will have the decision then to go after an offensive-minded head coach to maximize the window that they have with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb with their massive 4-year contracts coming up, or do they go after a defensive-minded head coach with Micah Parsons getting ready to sign his extension this offseason and trying to maximize what they can do on the defensive side of the ball? And wherever direction that ends up leaning can kind of spell what that future staff could look like. Now, are there some guys in the building that the front office feels good about? Absolutely. I think you could look at tight ends coach Lunda Wells. He's one. I think you could look at a defensive line coach, Jeff Scanina. They like what he's done this year as far as getting guys ready, even with all the injuries that have happened on the defensive line, still being active in the pass rush. You can look at the run game coordinator and Paul Gunther. I think if McCarthy returns and there's a situation where Mike Zimmer wants to retire, I think you could be looking at Paul Gunther potentially being a defensive coordinator here in Dallas if everything pans out in that way. But a lot of the questions that would have to be answered need the answer of Mike McCarthy first.
No, they certainly do. Now, let me ask you this. Once we do finally move past this, and again, you've already said, look, Jerry's not in a huge rush, but at some point, he's got to get this done. With his age and everything, and I know that's the elephant in the room, right? It's like everybody, nobody wants to say, look, the dude's 82 years old, and he's not the same guy that he was 35 years ago, and so, time is of the essence for this football team. Do you think in any way, shape, or form that they may just, I get they want to draft and develop, but could they dabble a little bit in free agency this offseason?
Yeah, it really depends on how much flexibility they create for themselves.
Yeah.
You look at the Micah Parsons contract, if they're able to get that done in a timely manner. It's a situation where Micah wants to get it done in a timely manner because he understands the financial restraints that go into him not getting it done. He saw what happened, with the Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb negotiations last year and how that kind of limited them in free agency. But Jerry Jones is sitting with Micah Parsons at the Cotton Bowl on Friday. That's what Jerry told us on Sunday to start these conversations and get these talks going. going, and that's a healthy step in the right direction. And then you got to figure out how to create cap space aside from that, because you have some big contracts on your books coming up. You could look at a Terrence Steele, you could look at a Trayvon Diggs, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson. These are guys that have some sizable cheddar on that cap hit, and do they feel like they're getting the return on investment? And if that answer is no, then what does it look like in creating cap space with those guys? Is it a restructure? Is it a trade? Is it a release? What exactly does that look like? I think there's going to have to be some questions answered there. But if they're able to create some cap flexibility ahead of the league year on March 12th and head into free agency with some cap space, there should be some opportunities to make some things happen. Now, granted, this free agency pool is not nearly as talented as it was a year ago. I think they really missed the swing as far as getting in on some guys last year that would have been heavy contributors to this team. But you still look at like the receiver position. T. Higgins is going to be due up. Tyreek Hill is starting to say that he wants out of Miami. You can look at Stephon Diggs. Granted, he's coming off a torn ACL, but how comfortable would you feel with him coming to Dallas? And that's just the receiver position. You could look around on both sides of the ball. I think you'd find some guys. But I think first and foremost, you look at the guys in-house too. Osa Odighizuwa, he's going to command a pretty big price tag. Rico Dowdle, is he going to get 2 years, $9 million? Is that something the Cowboys will be comfortable paying? I think there's going to be a lot of questions there as well.
Nick, give me this nugget before I get out of here. If Mike McCarthy is not brought back, is there any other names you're hearing? Or if not, another name you'd like to bring in with Dak and CD?
Yeah, not necessarily a name I'm hearing. This is just kind of like my gut feeling at the end of the day if McCarthy does not pan out. I know how much love and affection there is for Kellen Moore in that building still. So that's one I would throw out.
You're the third person to hear say Kellen Moore's name.
I'm going to say I've heard that name a bunch in the last week. Interesting.
Well, there you go.
All right, real quick, because I know you're a football guy still at heart. What game is on your radar this weekend?
Yeah, I will be at the Cotton Bowl, covering the Cotton Bowl for the Star-Telegram. So really excited about that one. Hoping to get through the blizzard tundra to get into AT&T Stadium on Friday. But looking forward to both of these semifinals. They're going to be a lot of fun.
What about NFL-wise?
NFL-wise, this Bucs-Commanders matchup is so interesting for me. Okay. Aside from the Mike Evans-Marshawn Lattimore matchup,
yeah.
I think these are two teams that probably wouldn't have seen themselves in this kind of stage early in the playoffs, and both have an opportunity to head into the divisional round. So I think that one's going to be really fascinating. But the Packers-Eagles game, I mean, you talk about, okay, if McCarthy is not the head coach come, this time next week, and we start looking around at some other candidates, and all of a sudden the Eagles are out of the playoffs, then that kind of opens up the Kellen Moore conversation even more. So that's certainly going to be one I'm watching as well.
Nick, Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold?
Am I building a team or am I trying to win now?
Trying to win the game this weekend.
I'll take Baker.
I knew I liked you, Nick. I knew you were my boy, Nick.
This guy here. Tell the folks at home, not named Blake Elliott, where they can find you at on the old X, Twitter, and socials.
Yeah, give me a follow on Twitter /X, Nick Harris, FWST, and then give us a read on star-telegram.com. We got a lot of stuff coming.
Great stuff as always, Nick. Happy belated birthday. You're just a pup. God bless you, and have fun this weekend.
Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great one.